What's up, folks? I'm Odd, by the way. I got my grubby little hands on Godot again. I finally got around to somewhat improving the fantasy character roller. As you can see here on the desktop, it has a new background. A lot of the elements haven't changed, but that I think is one of the ones that I wanted to. Mainly, I just didn't like the color of brown that I chose for it before. It is resizable, which was incredibly easy, and I don't know why I didn't look it up before, but that is available. I'm gonna pop this back and then go over here. But we also have a whole new range of selections and a nice new little graphic for the roller. Everything else is mostly the same. Obviously, it's the same basic premise. But yeah, there are more species, better generalizations, just kind of a nicer spread, I feel, personally. Obviously, this is kind of my own thing, so I wanted to just make it more usable for me. One thing, I didn't realize that I hadn't put fairies in here before. I put changelings, but not fairies. So, I changed that. It's difficult when you're trying to list a bunch of different species to work with. But, yeah, we have some nice rollability here for our choices. And yeah, you may notice that we have some new species like equi and bove, i.e. horses and cows, essentially, but like horse-like and cow-like is the general vibe. Cervi, deer-like, rodent folk as opposed to raccoon folk, rabbit folk, mouse folk, rat folk, you get the idea. So it's a little bit more generalized, it gives a little bit more wiggle room for the roller to decide on that, which I think is interesting. And then there are some situations that you need to, I think, make a decision. Like, there is amphibi, which is like, obviously amphibious creatures, but there is also steady that technically count as both tortoise and turtle. So it's up to you whether or not you want to make your amphibia a turtle, because turtles are amphibians, but the general idea is like frogs and salamanders for amphibi. Does that make sense? And then of course, like things like hyenas that kind of lay somewhere between caniform and feliform and are technically more related to cats than they are to dogs. Like, you can choose to make it a hyena canifolk if you want to. Personally, I think they would be felifolk. But is that cheating? I don't know. But I did get another suggestion that I do this again with a party of 3 that is a little bit more single species centric with 1 hybrid, which I think is interesting, and it makes sense for the dynamic that there wouldn't be as many hybrids in the world as maybe I have put into them. I can restrain myself, okay? And because it was a suggestion, I figured that that would be a good idea. So we're going to be rolling 2 normal character rolls and then 1 hybrid character to top it all off at that. So I'm excited, and I've got my whole new little range of things, and obviously this is up on itch. The original is 2, so this isn't an update, this is a new version. This is like a 2 or 1.5 really, but the original is still there if you want to get it. I also want to leave it up on the old videos in case people want to use that specific roller, you know, just that kind of stuff. But yeah, available on itch.io for free. You can leave a little tip if you want to, but free. $0. So let us just get right into it and roll our character and see what we get for our first selection. Shall we? Oh, the skin tone works perfectly because we have a 7-foot tall rogue lizard folk, a woman with a kind of teal skin tone. And honestly, that kind of works for the vibe that we're going for here. And again, the skin tone is kind of just like a base color for me most of the time, so I'm not really like always operating under the assumption that that is their skin color. In this case, it would probably be scale color or the main color of the character's color scheme, because these colors are truly random and it's a lot. That is our first character, and our second normal character is going to be a 5-foot tall artificer rodent folk, which actually makes sense with the height, a man with a pink mane color or skin tone. So a situation where we could probably wind up with another albino character, because I think that I did it before and it was like, oh, the white is the main tone, I'll make their fur white. But in this case, it could be the literal skin tone and be this pinkish color and still be a white or albino character. So that's fun. All right, we'll grab that. And for our one hybrid of the day, we will roll this. And they stack like this, so they... That's not a hybrid. This can happen. You can roll a hybrid and still technically get a singular species in this circumstance. So I think that I'm going to re-roll because we already have 2 standard species, and I want something a little bit more fun than a minotaur and a minotaur. Here we go. 6 foot tall, fighter, a giant, and an infernal or demon lineage, so kind of like the tiefling. Agender with a blue main color motif or skin tone, which maybe I should have changed that then for the entry there. I just felt like that made sense, like main color maybe. I think that for now that skin tone works well for its intention. Let me pop you guys down over to clip so we can take a look at these. So refresher, 7 foot tall rogue lizard folk woman with a bit of a teal mane color or skin tone, probably her scale tone technically. I don't know if that would be considered skin tone in a lizard folk situation. I'm getting maybe like iguana, I'm not totally sure. Or maybe just like a regular like blue tongued skink or something like that. That might be fun. And then our 5 foot tall artificer, a rodent folk, i.e. a mouse or a raccoon, a man with a little bit of a pink skin tone or mane tone. Again, I could see an albino character. Artificer, honestly, I could see like a rat or a mouse. I think that that would be super cute, kind of a Rats of Nim situation. And then we have a 6 foot tall fighter, giant and infernal lineage, who's agender with a blue skin tone, which could honestly work given they have some demon heritage. But okay, I will go ahead and pop you guys over to speed paint voiceover so that you can see what I've come up with for these 3. A little bit more of a variety, a little bit more of artist choice this time around, but still random, still kind of takes the burden of picking at least a base to start with off of me, which I enjoy. So, limitations hour, which is how we work best, so I will see you there. First up, we have our lizard folk rogue woman. I wound up trying to see if I could find a species of lizard that mostly matched the teal I rolled, and I came across the blue-crested or Indo-Chinese forest lizard. Their scales can change color, which also felt really apt for a rogue to me. Both sexes can change their heads to this very bright teal, similar to the tone that I rolled as a mating display, or if they're threatened, at least from what I could find, but they're typically kind of a brown camouflaged sort of color. In an anthropomorphic situation like this, I think the coloration could either be a fashion choice like makeup, ranging to an involuntary response like blushing. Basically, I just wanted the cool colors for this piece, okay? It took me a while to figure out essentially everything else though, from the pose to the outfit the character would be wearing. This whole group probably took me the longest out of most, if not all, of my random roll parties. Once I got an idea of where I wanted to go with this character, I gave her less of a skulking in the shadows outfit and more of a blending in with the crowd outfit. Although the colors do still range pretty dark, but she is still a rogue. I decided on a kind of runaway nobility or royalty sort of vibe for her, so I wanted the clothes to look more formal and a little luxe, but still practical. I named this girl Sequin because her scales reminded me of them. Sequin's species of lizard folk are rare and special. That was what she was always told. But after a while, the notion of rarity seemed to be tied with superiority, and Sequin's place in the nobility of her small population meant that she was the most sought-after prize in their kingdom. She spent some amount of time feeling like the future of her species, a savior, but she soon found that what her family was looking for wasn't just expansion, but some notion of purity. The final straw was when she was married off to the prince, who turned out to be a second cousin at best. She slipped out into the night and out of her kingdom by morning. Trained in poise and with a large bounty on her head, she turned to underground guilds for work as a rogue. She's still baffled by the world she was sheltered from, and has even met some exiles from her own kingdom whose only crimes were finding love in another clan of lizard folk, or perhaps another species altogether. A lot of them even had families, something she was never aware could even happen. She wonders if she could show her kingdom this truth one day, or if they'd even listen. Next up is our rodent folk artificer man. I decided to go for a rat here because it made the most sense with both the class and the color I rolled, which fit really well as a pink skin tone under the white fur of an albino rat. Now, after all that struggle with Sequin, I don't know why one of the first thoughts out of my head was, oh, it would be cool to give him a battle chair. I genuinely don't know why I decide to give myself more work sometimes. Usually because it's worth it, I guess, which this also totally was. I thought it would make sense to have an artificer who makes his own mobility aids. Instead of a standard chair, though, I went for an almost centaur setup with some mechanical legs. This is Wolfgang, which is kind of a twofold personal lore name for me. Initially, as a teenager, I thought it would be cool to name a rat Wolfgang, so I used the name on an albino rat OC very similar to this character. Then, I did wind up getting and naming a rat Wolfgang, but he was a gray and white hooded rat with a little mustache. So, this name has been imaginary, real, and imaginary again. I guess this could essentially be a redesign of the original OC I made. I think he was even an inventor. It's just also now in honor of my very real rat, who has been gone for several years now. I'd love to get rats again, but they have such short lifespans. I want to be in a position where I can at least, pamper them, and I'm not really there yet. Also, I do have a cat now, and she would harass them. I know her. So they need to, their own room. One day, maybe. But on to lore. Wolfgang was born very sickly and weak and left on the doorstep of an aristocrat couple who were having trouble starting a family. Seeing it as a sign, they took him in. In a relatively short period of time, two things started to become clear. The boy had very little strength in his back legs that showed no sign of improving, and was incredibly intelligent. He was fitted to a number of mobility devices, some in the hopes he'd gain strength, but ultimately used his entire life, and given as many tutors and books as he could make use of. He grew especially interested in improving on the limitations of the original chairs he was offered. He's made a number of automated machines using different amounts of technology and magic. Some can offer him the ability to walk upright, but are still taxing on his body, or for that matter, just not as efficient. His chair Scorpion is both his favorite means of transport and can operate via control or autonomously, acting as his robotic companion too. He wanted to travel, but though he felt more than capable, the idea of leaving alone felt daunting. Then he zeroed in on Sequin scoping out one of his parents' galas. Instead of revealing her attempt at robbing a noble, he offered her a job. Sequin turned out to be the best possible choice due to her own upbringing. The two bonded instantly on their similar lives, feeling trapped in their own little bubbles. They've been traveling together ever since. And finally, we get to our one hybrid for this episode, our Infernal Giant Fighter. I kind of instantly had a thought for this one once I started working on them, and this is kind of a weird inspiration, but if you're not familiar with US folklore, there's a character called Paul Bunyan, who is a giant, and he has a blue ox named Babe. I thought it would be funny to have a character kind of reminiscent of that with the same name. Everything else was pretty straightforward after that, beyond figuring out a pose I liked for this character I had decided would go in the middle of the composition here. Fighters feel a bit like a catch-all class, so there isn't a lot of aesthetic clarity there. What I wound up with might be considered more of a barbarian look, I'm not totally sure. I think maybe the idea as a whole might be better suited for a barbarian, and probably a furbolg or cowfolk at that, but I was working with the inspiration that I had here, okay? Beside their armor and sword, I decided to make everything about this character blue, and I just tried to balance it out with the browns and golds of the outfit itself. Babe was one of many infernal hybrids with the same story. Rejected by their parents from birth and left to whatever sanctuary might take pity on them. Instead of whatever monastery or orphanage they would have wound up at, though, Babe was instead taken in by a shady passerby. They were brought up alongside other fighters, a lot of whom were infernal as well, and saw themselves as a weapon first and foremost. The conditions were clearly rough, but there was no other life to them, no way out. Until one night when the Colosseum was literally and figuratively cracked open by a pair of adventurers who had unveiled the deeds of the benefactors for this underground fighting. Many of their competitors ran, but Babe felt lost in the moment. This was all they were. They went to the two animal folk who had freed all of their now fleeing siblings, and the two spoke kindly and offered help. Babe swore their services to the two and is slowly learning their place in the world may not just be as a weapon. Maybe. But those are my characters for this week. This one took me a little longer than I anticipated, but I think that was all the more worth it to see the results looking as nice as they are. Let me know what you think of these characters in the comments and which is your favorite, maybe which one you would play, and if that's any different. I feel like it could be. Sequin is my personal favorite for both, I think, but I can't help but feeling a personal connection to Wolfgang just because of his name. At that though, I'll leave this here, and I'll see y'all next time.